everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me once again is Adam Goodman, partner at Ballard Partners. Adam, thanks so much for joining me.
Another interesting night last night.
It is the first big election night since President Trump won re-election in 2024. And when we woke up the morning after Election Day last year, we woke up, it was a good day for Republicans. We're waking up today, it was a good night, and now it's a good day, I guess, for Democrats here. I'm curious, you're looking at all the different races from New Jersey to New York, Virginia, California with Prop 50 on the ballot. I mean, what sticks out to you? What are some of your takeaways?
Well, it's certainly a lot of takeaways. Let's start with the obvious. Clearly, voters last night were expressing frustration with Washington. We had the shutdown in particular that was happening in an inopportune moment, especially as it impacts Virginia elections, which has a heavy concentration of federal workers who have either been laid off, furloughed, or are concerned about both. And obviously, the Republican Party controls the White House and both houses of Congress. So there is that, and there's no escaping that. You know, elections often, Brittany, are about timing. Were the shutdown resolved and things were back to normal, there could have been a somewhat different verdict last night, but you might say that we're at the nadir of that moment in time, but certainly did not augur well for the Republican Party. The other thing is to take a look at history. I'm a history major from back in my college days, so I always look for historical precedents because I tend to think we repeat things over time. And if you look at the history in New Jersey and Virginia, both of which are blue-leaning states. So remember, last night, the primary elections were in blue areas. Virginia, New Jersey, certainly New York City, and certainly California. In Virginia, only one time in the last half century has the party in power in the White House won the Virginia governor's race. It was back in the Obama days when Terry McAuliffe pulled off a close win in his election campaign when Barack Obama was in the White House. So only once in 50 years. Obviously, the Democrat Sparrenberger winning last night keeps history pretty consistent there. And in New Jersey, it's almost the same. I think in the last 11 or 12 elections in Jersey, only three has resulted in a split verdict, you might say, with a Republican governor and a Democratic president, or vice versa. The most recent being Murphy's win a couple of years ago, Governor Murphy, when Biden was in the White House, but Murphy barely won. So you've got that to consider. Then there's this, which is an interesting thing as you start to move forward, because it's just our habit, right? We read all sorts of things into everything, and oh my gosh, is this Titanic? Is this a sea wave? Is this a massive change? Not really. It's really the jury on that, and always, I can always say this, is completely out, because the Washington Post just came out with a poll a couple days ago, and they were polling the political environment, right? And 63% of Americans were saying that the president was out of touch, which is a reflection of also approval, disapproval, where obviously the disapproval for the president is at relatively high levels versus any other time in his second term of office. But while saying that, 68% in the same poll say Democrats are out of touch. So I don't think the Democrats have figured out suddenly and overnight the primary issue they face, which is an identity issue. You could say last night that because you have a progressive in Mamdani winning pretty decidedly in New York City, and an individual like Spanberger in Virginia and Cheryl in New Jersey, both considered moderates, that the Democratic Party hasn't decided what they are yet. Are they progressives? Are they moderates? Are they both? The optimists in the Democratic Party will say we're both. It depends on the environment. But remember, again, these elections were in essentially blue areas. What happens and how does the rest of the country feel, especially in red states, which were not tested last night, about the state of affairs? And how will they feel if soon to be Mayor Mamdani is not successful in overlaying his Democrat socialist policies into and onto the people of New York, how that becomes kind of a poster child item for Republicans in the midterms in the rest of the country. So those are my immediate takeaways. Obviously, we should also talk about demographics last night and what we saw on those.
I mean, those takeaways are you're tamping down the fears perhaps that Republicans could potentially have, seeing good night for Democrats, good night for Democrats. You're essentially saying, hey guys, I'm a student of history. This is pretty typical. You know, a Democratic measure in California winning isn't exactly groundbreaking here.
Right.
I'm curious, when you look at these two types though of Democrats winning, I'm curious, does that concern you? Because in New York City, you see a 34-year-old self-described Democratic socialist win. He didn't have a national profile until this race. He had a lighter resume, so to speak. He was a New York State Assembly member. Then in Virginia and New Jersey, you see these more perhaps moderate Democrats winning with Spamberger as well as Sherrill. They both have national security backgrounds, both served in Congress. When you're seeing two types of Democrats win last night, as a Republican then, what's the strategy for the midterms? Because are you seeing, hey, perhaps Democrats, I know they might not have found their footing of where to go, but both of these candidates, two separate paths, ran on affordability?
Yeah, great question. You know how they say all politics is local? That we saw last night. That's why I think you can have a Democratic socialist prevail in New York City and a moderate prevail in both New Jersey and Virginia. What Republicans are going to take a very good hard look at here is where the bleed was last night. And decidedly, it was in two places, it seems, from the early exit polls that we've seen. One is among minorities who had kind of rallied in a big way behind President Trump in 24. There was a lot of kind of backtracking among minorities last night, at least in these particular contests. That's something clearly Republicans are going to keep an eye on, for them to have a not only a winning national coalition, but a governing one. I think they need to find a way to maintain the gains that they saw in 24 and extend those into and beyond the 26 midterms. The other thing is the quote unquote suburban vote. And that also is something that should concern Republicans if this were a trend, because I think suburbia last night, especially in Virginia and some of the places I studied, clearly were going Democrat in margins that exceeded anything we saw in 2024 with Trump, or in the pivotal election before that when Youngkin prevailed as governor in that race in Virginia. So two things to watch. Are they concerning for Republicans? Should be. But also consider this. Last night, if you say, what was this a referendum on? Was it a referendum on Trump? The Democratic Party stalwarts will say absolutely. Total referendum on Donald Trump. I think that the president was not really on the ballot last night. It was more about kind of historical trends and kind of the pox and all on the governing party kind of mantra that led to this. But I think what really came out last night, and the jury is completely out on this, Brittany, is pocketbook economics, right? Affordability is a word that Democrats were using a lot in this election cycle as a wedge issue against Republicans. How will the country feel about pocketbook economics in 2026? Clearly, we have all sorts of uncertainties because of tariffs and new trade policies that are in play right now, the shutdown, government itself. But in 2026, what does inflation look like? what does the cost of living look like? And of course, under affordability, Democrats have squarely put the words healthcare in play. Uh, what are healthcare costs like? Because there's been a lot of concern about new policies that may increase premiums because of the lack of subsidies for Obama era policy. Um, where are we on those fronts? I think that is the most important thing to watch moving forward. As a predictor, it was just kind of what was expected by the out party against the in party, or was the beginning of perhaps the out party getting more sea legs underneath it to be able to prevail in a more national way not long from now.
I mean, I think from the dawn of time, it's the economy, stupid. It comes down to a lot of elections, obviously come down to affordability. They come down to the economy. And I find it fascinating. If you and I were sitting here last year, I mean, how many times have you and I talked about more voters in 2024 thought President Trump and Republicans were better equipped at handling the economy, better equipped at the affordability issue than Democrats? A year later, based on these races where these candidates ran on affordability, they snatched that issue back. And in these areas, bluer areas, of course, they thought, voters thought that the Democrats there could handle the affordability issue. I guess my next question for you is, in the next year, if I'm a Republican, I'm sitting here thinking, we need to snatch that affordability issue back. We need to put the ball back in our court. How do they do that?
Remember, I referred to the word timing up front in this interview. It's all about timing, right? The things that President Trump and Republicans are putting into play were not going to be overnight solutions to what was ailing the country. And it wasn't long ago, you and I were talking about why is it that 75% of Americans think we're on the wrong track. That was under President Biden, because they felt we're on the wrong track. To turn that around was not going to happen in a matter of months. A lot of the policies that the president and Republicans are championing right now are going to need a little time to mature and to be absolutely and fully in play. Until they are, there's going to be turbulence. And I think, last night there was some turbulence in the electorate because they are not yet seeing the results of what the president firmly believes will be a sea change for Americans across the board in terms of their ability not only to survive, but to prosper in an America that has more jobs coming back, more investment, especially from abroad, better trade policies that will ultimately be reflected in pricing on the grocery store shelf. All those things, inflation, they're gonna need a little more ramp to go down before they fully kick in. So I guess I'm saying this. If you're a Democrat, you're feeling very good because you've stopped the bleeding, for sure. You can't say last night wasn't a good night for them. It was. Is it a signal that this is another change in the way Americans are seeing themselves and their country in the future? That I don't see yet, and I don't think it's fair to say it's more than speculation to say that is what we're witnessing. We're seeing almost an historical certainty in terms of the out party, in party dynamics. But what the president is trying to do in reimagining the way government does business, the way America does business, the way we see ourselves, I think that is not been something that was going to be fully tested under any circumstance last night. It will be in the midterms. And I think that's where the president, the Republican Party, in fact, the Democratic Party as well, all eyes should be on that. That is the fight that's ahead.
I want to turn back to New York because I saw some chatter online, and I'm curious if you think this as well. I saw some Republicans essentially say that Mamdani is a gift to Republicans. Journalist Jonathan Lemire wrote this. Now Mamdani faces a war with the president, himself a New Yorker. It's the fight Trump wants. And Zohran Mamdani, he sent a message directly to President Trump after he won in his victory speech. He told President Trump to, since I know you're watching, I have 4 words for you, turn the volume up. Do you think there's going to be this fight between President Trump, the New York City mayor, now elect, going to be New York City mayor in 2026? And do you think Republicans can run on, hey, that's the party of democratic socialism, we're the party of more moderates?
I love the question. I mean, Mamdani, give Mamdani credit. Here's a guy that came from nowhere, hit the right chords, and won going away against an institutional figure like Cuomo, who you could argue that Cuomo's best days were already behind him before he decided to run and not only lose the Democratic primary, but then to try again as an independent. I think this is something, I've been saying this for months, this is something Republicans should really want, to have Mamdani as the poster child of the Democratic Party. Could he succeed? Possibly. Will he succeed? Unlikely. Remember, this is a guy that was talking about defunding the police, about globalizing the intifada, about free food in grocery stores, etc., all across the city. That would be city-owned. He is also talking about real estate in terms of rent control that is probably stoked panic into every owner of every property in New York. He has talked about a 50%, essentially would amount to a 50% increase in the corporate tax. Imagine how Wall Street's going to take to that. We've already seen some share of Wall Street bolt to Florida over the last couple of years. That will continue and accelerate if Mamdani successfully puts this into play. And then the final thing is this, and say you're a political strategist, Brittany, do you think you could sell Mamdani's prescriptions for how to govern, based somewhat on what I just shared, in Indiana, Ohio, Missouri, Texas, even in the swing states like Colorado, Arizona? Unlikely. The hardest part of the challenge ahead for Democrats, if Mamdani becomes the focus of President Trump and the Republican Party, is how do you sell the Mamdani prescription for governance in places outside of New York City, where clearly it's more of a fit there than arguably it would be anywhere else?
I mean, it's a good point. I guess maybe if I'm a Democrat strategist, I would say, hey, well, yes, that does work in New York City. We saw that last night. But more moderates work in Jersey, more moderates work in Virginia. As you said, politics is very local. I mean, is that a good argument back, or does that fall on deaf ears for Republicans?
I don't think any of this is falling on deaf ears on Republicans, right? And the nice thing about elections, first of all, number one, we need to have a very strong, vital, competitive two-party system. And for those that really cheer for democracy, I think it was a good night for democracy last night, because obviously Republicans have been on a wave, controlling everything that there is to control here in Washington. So there is that part of it, right? But there are takeaways here for the Republicans that I trust they're going to take very seriously as they start to message and position for the midterms in 26. And by the way, the wave that I just referred to, there's also been a wave in terms of changes in registration. And keep your eye on this a little bit, Brittany. In New Jersey, it was not a good night, obviously, for Jack Ciattarelli in the governor's race. However, Republicans who used to have a disadvantage of over 1 million votes in registration versus Democrats had 1 million registration edge, is now down to about 800,000. Same thing's happening in states, blue and otherwise, all across the country. So for the Democratic Party, can they kind of reverse the trend of a loss of registered Democrats moving into the future. And by the way, a lot of the loss is not going immediately, and not surprisingly, it's not going immediately to the Republican column. It's going into independents. Can they reverse that? Because that has not been true for Republicans. They've had very meaningful registration gains in major states across the country. If that continues, that is a countervailing factor for Republicans and Republican hopefuls in 26. But I'm looking forward to the midterms because I think, unlike off-year elections that happened last night, the midterms are a more complete reflection on and referendum of the party in power, the things in play. Is it status quo? Is it change? And Republicans ran on a change platform in 24. In 26, they become the status quo, right? And how do they then position themselves as showing there's a new kind of status quo in play that's healthy and worth supporting and cheering for? That is what's ahead of us, Brittany, and that will be the fight to come.
And I know that President Trump and you both agree that the shutdown really impacted the election last night. Timing's everything. Yeah. As we sit here right now, this is the longest shutdown in American history. Do you think that this election and the results impact the shutdown at all? Do you think that Republicans say, hey, wasn't the best night for us? It was a good night for Democrats. Maybe we should sit down, negotiate perhaps on health care with Democrats. People want to see things regarding affordability, regarding healthcare movement on there. Do you think it makes Democrats, so on the other hand, double down and say, hey, people like when we stand up against Republicans. People like when we stand up and try to fight for healthcare. We're not moving an inch. I mean, where do you see this go? Because right now, I know for the first few weeks, it didn't seem like many Americans really had their finger on the pulse when it came to the shutdown. It wasn't really affecting them. Now it is. We're seeing SNAP benefits halved in the month of Thanksgiving. We're seeing the transportation secretary saying, hey, travel is going to be a mess, and we're coming up to the busiest travel time in the year. I mean, where do you think the shutdown falls in when it comes to election night results last night?
It's going to be fascinating to watch. I mean, we already are into the longest shutdown in the history of the United States of America. It's the longest on record, right? I don't think it can go on very much longer. Republicans certainly are more incentivized, I would think, to want to bring this in for a landing. Conversely, I think Democrats, kind of suggested in your question, Brittany, they want this to keep going. Yes, it's bringing a lot of pain, and the SNAP benefits being one part of this. I think the travel to come is an even bigger part, because when people start seeing that a lot of holiday flights are being upended, I think that might be the last straw, and we're not far from the Thanksgiving holiday, right? But Democrats, if they're motivated to want to say, hey, unless you concede to us, we're going to hold our ground. We won last night by holding our ground. That's the wrong signal for Democrats to take here. They didn't win by holding their ground on the shutdown. Republicans might have lost from the shutdown. Democrats didn't gain because they were suddenly seen as heroic figures, unwilling to bend for the cause of principle and doing what's right. I think they're going to become more and more in play here and to blame if they decide they're going to become recalcitrant and not move an inch to try to milk everything they can out of the shutdown moment. I hope, frankly, for the American people. What the American people need to be cheering for is resolution, not extended shutdowns.
Well, with the shutdown, with the midterms, I mean, I think that means, hopefully, that you and I have plenty of exciting conversations to come. Adam Goodman, it's always a treat to talk with you, especially right after an election. Thank you so much for joining me.
Always great to be with you, Brittany. So much ahead.